We're at the Smart Energy International studio at China Utility Week, and in studio with me is Mr. Yin Chao, who is the Managing Director of Digital Renaissance Foundation. Welcome to the studio, Yin. I wanted to ask you, how do you see blockchain changing the dynamics within the energy sector in China and globally?
Yeah. What I see is that blockchain actually is destroying the so-called conventional finance industry globally, like banking, security, or insurance. And of course, energy is the next stop for blockchain renovation. Currently, you see that a lot of those European countries, they are utilizing blockchain technology to create a new atmosphere for innovation in their own country. Like you see a lot of startups based in Berlin or based in Amsterdam, they are somehow using blockchain technology, creating very interesting decentralized grid project, decentralized generation projects, especially in those local communities. So I see that currently the frontier of blockchain innovation is not in China, it actually is in Europe, especially in those Central Europe countries like Germany, like Austria, also like France or Great Britain. And the next stop will be somehow like Japan, South Korea, and due to the large size and the very complicated domestic situation, especially in policy in China, what I see is that within the next 3 or even somehow 5 years, there will be not very significant change regarding the blockchain, especially the cryptocurrency policy in China. Still, we will have somehow a very, a ferocious ban against all kinds of cryptocurrency in China. So, cryptocurrency is very vital for a successful blockchain project. So, without somehow a legitimate cryptocurrency policy environment, no blockchain companies can somehow survive in the current situation in China. So I see that if China would like to join the blockchain innovation, he has to remove all those kind of unnecessary ban against the blockchain or against cryptocurrency somehow, so that companies and individuals like us will go back to China and establish our own companies and help those utility companies and those communities to launch their own blockchain energy projects. Otherwise, no somehow innovations or creations upon blockchain, whether in energy or not, will be somehow foreseen in China in the next 3 or 5 years. But I believe in the administration of the China government that they will see the beneficial sides of blockchain, of especially cryptocurrency in a long term, maybe in 10 years or even 20 years. So maybe in the year 2040, China will have a totally different policy atmosphere, favorable atmosphere for cryptocurrency, for blockchain. So there will be a difference in the future that for the energy application or any kind of application based on blockchain, utilizing cryptocurrency vehicles to serve the people, to serve the country.
Thank you. That's quite a comprehensive answer and a really good overview. Where do you believe there are unexpected avenues of opportunity?
Sure. What I see the first, I had just mentioned that European countries, they are embracing blockchain very, actively, and also besides or outside of those European countries, so Southeastern Asian countries like Malaysia or Vietnam or Indonesia or especially Philippines. So Southeast Asia countries, they are really quite open towards blockchain technologies. Like in Philippines, a lot of those, provincial governments, they are implementing or somehow drafting favorable policies for blockchain application for cryptocurrencies. And also in Thailand and also in Malaysia, these two countries, they have already issued their favorable policies for cryptocurrency exchanges. So within these countries, with existed established infrastructure for blockchain, for cryptocurrencies, a lot of small-sized startups, they can utilize, they can take advantage of this existed infrastructure to create their own blockchain-based energy infrastructure, and also they can very easily raise a certain amount of fund to support their initial somehow operation of their innovation. So what I see is that those countries with favorable and open-minded policies and the leaders, they can take advantage of the somehow we saw the low-hanging fruits of the blockchain technologies. That's the somehow the opportunities.
Thank you. And you mentioned earlier on policy being a barrier to introduce cryptocurrency. What do you believe are the biggest threats and maybe some of the opportunities facing the utility sector, and how can these be mitted against or exploited? So it's a double-edged question. What is for and what is against in your view?
Regarding the pros and cons for blockchain in the energy sectors, there are a lot of those reports really digging very deep into the factors. And I see the biggest threats inside those utilities, especially those big utility companies, is their mindset. With a very conservative mindset and a so-called a big company style operation infrastructure or pyramid structure for management is currently really so-called, we call this jeopardizing the sentiment for blockchain application inside those companies. I have a lot of those friends inside those big companies, especially the young guys, young engineers. They are really enthusiastic and also really experts of blockchain technology, of cryptocurrency applications. They have submitted a lot of those proposals internally to their managing directors, to their board of members regarding how to utilize blockchain to create a small size community level decentralized power network, and also how to create a token-based carbon credit exchange using blockchain technology, but no answers or no favorable responses from their managing directors, from their board of members, just because they don't know why we have a highly centralized and also a very efficient, at least from their side, very efficient management structure currently in hand, why we should use blockchain to create a decentralized one to serve those small-sized communities, why we can earn a lot of money using their licenses granted by the government, using their established power grid, centralized power grid infrastructures. Why we should use blockchain to decentralize it, to also somehow to destruct it. So you see that their board of members, they're a little bit, close-minded, old school towards the innovation, especially towards the, unknown factors like that. So these are threats, not that open-minded towards the destruction of innovation of blockchain technology for decentralization. And also there's pros. There are a lot of young guys in those big companies, in those utility companies. They are pushing the blockchain innovation inside their companies really very hard. Somehow effortless, but still there are a lot of effort made by those young guys. I really respect those engineers. Those guys, those companies are not owned by those young guys, by their own engineers, but they still try their best, even somehow potentially will jeopardize their future inside the pyramid structure of those companies, especially in China. But they still continuing push the frontier of blockchain application inside this company. So I believe in young people. I believe in the new technology. So maybe in the next 5 years, if a young guy who became somehow the director of some department of some sub-companies, so I see that in the future, the blockchain will be finally, ultimately utilizing in the utility sectors. But now it's too early for those old guys.
Thank you. That's quite a good overview. I appreciate you being in the studio here with us. I have one more question which we've not prepared for though. Do you have any successful case study of blockchain implementation, particularly, doesn't have to relate to utilities, but a successful case study you'd like to talk?
Successful, unsuccessful. Successful, right?
Successful.
Successful. There are a lot of successful, applications in various kind of sectors, like insurance. A Singapore company is utilizing a decentralized ledger technology blockchain to create a very small amount insurance for those, farmers, very small farmers in Malaysia, in other neighboring Southeast countries. Since normally in those developing countries, small farmers or some like other small business owners, they do not have adequate or inexpensive accesses to those financial services like insurance, like banking services, like asset-backing security services. So blockchain can create really low entry barrier services to those small business owners, decentralized one. And this is in financial sectors. And also in internet services like the social medias. Telegram, I don't know whether you are a user of Telegram, but Telegram is quite popular in Europe, especially in Russia. Since the Russian government, the Putin regime, they are somehow really punishing those guys with different opinions with his administrations. So a lot of those young people, they are tending to use Telegram instead of other centralized social medias like some kind of like WeChat or some kind of those centralized form of applications. So Telegram, this company, they are using blockchain technology to create a total decentralized social network for those young guys, for those guys who have different opinions with Putin or with other leaders in Russia or some other authoritarian countries.